Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Muhammad, the moderator of PhD Live Talk series. This series consists of friendly conversations that discusses some of the challenges facing PhD researchers and sharing their experiences and stories with everyone. This episode will focus on the process of peer-reviewed publications. It aims to outline some of the tips to consider before and after the submission of a manuscript for publication. The episode's guest speaker is Julian Laufs. He is a German researcher currently completing his PhD in Security and Crime Science at University College London in the UK. His research falls under the UCL Daaus Center for Future Crime. Julian holds a bachelor's degree in international relations at Malmö University in Sweden and an MSc in countering organized crime and terrorism at UCL. Welcome, Julian, to the PhD Live Talk series. To start with, could you please tell us what is your PhD about?
So the goal of my research is to identify how new smart city technologies may be used for crime prevention and detection in the future. So I look at how can the police and how can security services in general use the characteristics of future urban infrastructure to deter and prevent crimes. That includes things like 5G, but also something like the connectedness of the Internet of Things. More specifically, I look at what obstacles they might face in the procurement and the use of these technologies and these interventions. And here I look at things like public support and how the public will react, how people feel about these interventions, especially their use for crime prevention, which is, of course, especially in the UK, always a quite heated and ongoing debate. So overall, it's quite interesting as a project, and it certainly has some applicability for the future, and there's a lot of implications that come with it. So instead of just looking at something like facial recognition, it includes a broader range of things that might be possible, because obviously we're not limiting ourselves when we look at crime prevention in the future to just things like facial recognition, that's just visual, but also to other technologies. So yeah, overall, I take a quite structured and academic approach to the topic, but I also try to keep it as practical as possible, and I involve quite a lot of stakeholders in my research.
Have you published anything so far?
Yes, so I'm now in the last year of my PhD, and I have published one book chapter and 3 papers, and I'm about to publish, hopefully, fingers crossed, one more paper.
Based on your experience, Julian, what are some of the tips to consider before submitting a manuscript to a journal?
So before submitting your paper to a journal, you need to think about a couple of very basic things. The first one is, of course, that you need to pick an appropriate journal. So you need to check the thematic relevance, you need to check restrictions in terms of length, focus, topic, type of paper, and so on. And then, obviously this is optional, but recommended, I would say, check the impact factor. Check whether that's a very good established journal in the field, because obviously you want to publish in something that gives your research the maximum exposure. To find these journals, you can look online. Most of the big publishing houses have websites where you can find the journals, and they also have journal finders where you can use your abstract or your title to find an appropriate journal. There are also lists that list journals by impact factor, for example, that I found tremendously useful. Additionally, here, I think it's very useful to think about open access. That means whether your paper will be freely available or whether it will be part of a subscription deal. If you don't know what open access is yet, you should check out your university's resources, because I'm sure they have something on it, and they might even have a team that can help you find out more. Usually when you publish something, it costs a fee to make it open access, And if you're publishing as part of a bigger project that is externally funded, you may already have funding included. If you don't, then it might be worth, once again, checking out whether your university has a pot of money to fund something like that. The last thing you would want to do is make sure that you prepare your submission properly, that you check what is required in terms of the formatting and in terms of additional documents, where tables and figures have to be, and so on. Also write a letter to the editor. You can find some templates for that online, or even ask your colleagues and they might send you one. Once you prepare the document, you should also make sure to double check spelling and formatting, of course. It's also important that you adjust the style and the tone of your submission and tailor it to the journal and to the audience of the journal. Once you've done that and your submission looks good, you are ready to send it off.
How about after the submission of a manuscript? What are some of the things to be aware of at this stage?
Now, once you've sent off the paper, there's actually not much you have to do. You just have to wait for a reply from the editor. The editor first decides whether your paper is actually suitable for the journal and whether they would be interested in publishing it. Now, if the editor rejects your paper, don't be discouraged, because it might have just not been the right journal. So, try your luck somewhere else. If you are publishing with a larger publishing house, most larger journals have a transfer service, so they might say it's not suitable for their journal, but it may be good for something else. So they might transfer your paper free of charge to a different journal and a different editor, and they might take a look at it and see if it's publishable in their journal. So once the journal editor accepts your publication and says it is suitable for the journal, it will be sent off for peer review. Now, that can take a long time, and don't be discouraged if it takes several weeks or even months. Eventually, you'll get your paper back with comments from the reviewers, and don't be discouraged if there are a lot of them. Especially with my first publication, I got a lot of comments and I didn't really anticipate or expect it. So it was a little bit of a blow, but my supervisors were very kind and helped me throughout the process a lot. So it was quite encouraging, and I used the comments to make the paper better. Some comments might be easy to address, such as spelling errors, though obviously they shouldn't be in the text anymore at that stage. Others may take longer, such as rewriting some sections or even double checking parts of your analysis. Nevertheless, I think it's quite important that you consider that a positive thing. Lots of comments mean that you have lots of opportunities to make your paper better. And if the reviewers said your paper is worth publishing and gave you comments, you're halfway there, and ultimately it will make your paper stronger. So once you get everything done and you've incorporated all the comments in your paper, you should prepare your reply to the reviewers. It may seem a little counterintuitive first, but it's quite important that you thank them for their efforts on your paper. They spend likely several hours on this, on their private and unpaid time. So make sure to write a letter to say thank you. Outline how you have addressed their comments and their criticism, and if you haven't, or if you disagree with something, make a short description of why you disagree with it. Here, journals may have different styles, or different requirements, so you may be asked to prepare just the final version, or you may be asked to prepare a document with track changes. This may help reviewers to see what you've actually improved in the process. And it's quite easy if you've not done it throughout the process, or if you have problems in the process, it's quite easy to use Word, and you can use compare documents, and you use your final and your previous version, and it will highlight all the changes made You can also anonymize it, so it doesn't show your name as author XYZ, but it will show just as anonymized. Now, once the reviewers agree that their concerns have adequately been addressed, the journal will send your paper to the typeface editor, and you'll be invited to review the formatting. And there's usually a deadline on this, so something like 48 hours or 3 days, but at that point you're 99% there. So they will send you proof of the document, they will ask you to complete a publishing agreement, and there's a couple of smaller bureaucratic steps, and that's all fairly easy to do.
What is your take-home message for other researchers who are trying to publish?
Now, my take-home message for anyone who's trying to publish something for the first time would be to not be afraid to ask your supervisors or your colleagues who have done it before for help, because the process itself can be quite a daunting task and there can be a lot of pitfalls on the way. So I think it's quite important, especially at this point, to ask your colleagues, ask your friends, ask your supervisors or senior academics if they can help you with it. There's no shame, and everyone has published something for the first time, so it's quite important, and it can be a good shortcut if you don't know how to navigate this completely new environment, how to write a letter to the editor or what open access is, all those things. Google them, find out about them, but also don't be afraid to ask your colleagues. Another thing that you should keep in mind when you publish something is that once you get the final link from the journal to your publication, it's not done. The process isn't over yet. I mean, it's fantastic that you've published your paper, but you should also try to promote it, try to send it to your colleagues, try to put it on Twitter, try to put it on platforms such as ResearchGate, and try to engage with the research community about what you've done there. You want to get it out there, you want people to read it, and I think it's quite important to mention that to new researchers, to anyone who hasn't published yet, that promoting your research, promoting your work, that's why you put it out there. So it's quite important to try to get people to engage with it.
Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, and we hope you find something useful in them.